The human settlement on the neutral trade world was quiet, almost peaceful. It was a small station, floating among the stars, far from the battles and politics of the Galactic Council. Humans lived here alongside many alien species. Each species had its own customs, its own ideas about life, but humans had learned to adapt, to coexist, and to be polite. That had earned them a quiet respect from their neighbors, even if the Council often ignored them. Among the humans on the station, one child stood out. Her name was Leela. She had golden hair, bright eyes, and a smile that made even the grumpiest aliens pause. Leela was curious about everything, and she wanted to learn about every creature she met. She spent her days running through the station corridors, asking questions about the strange foods, the colorful clothing, and the complicated devices that hummed and glowed in every corner. The Galactic Council had come to the station that day to demonstrate their laws. It was a public event. Species from all over the sector had gathered in the central chamber to witness what they called the fairness of the Council. A long table stretched across the room, and alien council members with tall, sharp heads and shimmering skin sat behind it. Their eyes were cold and serious. They did not smile. They did not joke. Everything in the chamber was meant to show power, order, and control. Leela's parents had warned her to stay close. Humans were welcome in the hall, but they were expected to follow every rule. Humans had learned early that the council did not forgive mistakes. Leela, however, was not used to fear. She was not used to thinking about rules as life and death. To her, rules were just things to understand. She peeked at the alien council members, fascinated by their strange shapes and movements. She wanted to ask them why their skin shimmered, why their eyes had so many colors. She wanted to touch the smooth surface of the table to see if it really glowed as it seemed. She moved closer to the demonstration carefully. She did not see the small line marked on the floor, the invisible boundary that no one could cross. To her, it was just empty space. When she stepped over it, an alien enforcer noticed immediately. The enforcer was tall, with long limbs and sharp claws, and he moved toward Leela without hesitation. He said something in a language humans could barely understand. Leela froze. She did not understand what she had done wrong. She had not meant to break any rule. She had only been curious. The enforcer gestured with one claw, signaling the council. The council members' eyes narrowed. They whispered among themselves, sharp words bouncing across the chamber. To them, the action of one small human child was more than a mistake. It was an offense that could not be ignored. The law, they said, applied to all species equally. No exceptions could be made, not for age, not for innocence, not for kindness. Leela's parents rushed forward, trying to explain. They spoke in human language and in the council's language, but their words were ignored. The council was determined. They had chosen an example, and examples were never negotiable. The enforcer reached out, and in a motion too fast for anyone to stop, Leela was struck down. The chamber fell silent. Not a single alien moved, not a single human dared to breathe. The council announced that the child's death was legally justified and necessary to maintain order. Shock spread among humans on the station. Parents held their children tighter. Traitors whispered to one another. But the council assumed humans would obey. They assumed humans would cry, scream, and accept the punishment. They assumed humans were weak and fragile, unable to act when faced with injustice. They were very wrong. Across human space, news of the child's death spread quietly. There were no riots, no angry speeches were made, there was no desperate pleading. Humans do not always respond immediately. They observe, they remember, and they plan. The death of Leela, innocent and curious, lit a fire in the hearts of humans. They would not forget, they would not forgive. In the human colonies, families gathered in small rooms, talking quietly. Historians wrote down the story of the child and the injustice. Engineers began reviewing old projects that had been shelved for years. Scientists checked old research, looking for ways humans could protect themselves and each other in the future. It was not hatred that moved them, nor blind revenge. It was a clear, calm determination to ensure that no innocent human would ever die unjustly again. The Galactic Council, meanwhile, continued their work as if nothing had happened. They assumed humans were still weak, still polite, still obeying rules. They did not notice the fleets being inspected. They did not notice the communications arrays being strengthened. They did not notice the quiet gatherings of humans, sharing knowledge and planning for a future they hoped would never come. Even other species began to notice something strange. Humans did not scream, they did not lash out, they did not panic. Instead, they grew silent. They became focused. Their grief compressed into something sharp and precise, something dangerous in its restraint. To species used to loud anger and open displays of emotion, the human's calm was unsettling. Leela's parents, though broken with grief, carried on. They spoke gently to other humans, teaching them the importance of care, courage, and patience. They reminded everyone that humans could survive even when facing beings stronger than themselves. They reminded everyone that humans could endure cruelty without losing their sense of justice. At night, when the stars shone across the dark sky outside the station, humans looked up and thought of the child. Leela's laughter, her curiosity, her kindness, they became symbols of everything humans valued. They became reminders of why humans were willing to do what no one expected, to endure quietly, to prepare carefully, to act decisively when the time came. The council continued to meet to pass laws to maintain their order. They assumed the humans were still under control. They did not understand that humanity had a rule older than any law: protect the young, protect the innocent, respect life even when it is inconvenient. And that rule, written into the very core of human nature, would guide them in the days to come. It would guide their scientists, their engineers, their diplomats, and their soldiers. It would guide them in ways that the Galactic Council could not predict. By the time the Council returned to their chambers, humans were no longer just a small species on a distant trade station. They were a species that remembered, a species that acted quietly, without fanfare, with patience and care. And a species that would not forget what had been done to one small child named Leela. The station slowly returned to its usual routines, but nothing was the same. Humans walked with a quiet purpose. Their eyes carried a weight that aliens could not measure. They spoke softly, but every word contained thought, planning, and understanding. The Council's decision, meant to show power, had done the opposite. It had awakened something in humanity that could not be ignored. Every human, from the youngest child to the oldest elder, carried a memory of Leela. Every family taught their children her story. And every human who looked at the stars wondered how long it would be before the galaxy learned the truth. Humans are strong, clever, and patient. Humans are kind until kindness is taken from them. Humans remember, and humans act. The first part of the story ended not with war, not with shouting, not with anger, but with a quiet, terrible promise. The Galactic Council believed they had punished one small human child. They did not know that in doing so, they had lit a fire across human space that would grow stronger with every passing day. Humans had learned the first lesson of patience, focus, and determination. The Council had learned nothing, and in that difference, the future was already beginning to tilt. One day, the galaxy would see what humans could do when they protected what they loved. One day, the Council would see the truth. Until that day, humans waited, they worked, they prepared, they remembered Leela. And in every quiet moment, in every careful step, humanity made ready for the time when the silence would end. And the galaxy would realize that even a single spark of human grief could ignite a fire across the stars. After the death of Leela, the human colonies across the galaxy fell into a quiet, tense stillness. The Council believed the humans were broken, that they would mourn, cry, and return to obedience. But the opposite was happening. Humans were gathering quietly, connecting across the stars, sharing knowledge, and remembering the small life that had been taken. Their grief was focused, sharp, and purposeful. It was not loud, but it was dangerous in its restraint. On Earth, the command centers that had long been deactivated were powered up again. Engineers dusted off old blueprints of ships and stations, checking them for weaknesses and improvements. Scientists reactivated research that had been shelved for decades, scanning for new ways to protect civilians and monitor threats. Every human, from the youngest intern to the oldest strategist, understood one thing clearly: this was not just about grief. It was about ensuring that no child would ever be hurt like Leela again. In the quieter human colonies, families met in living rooms and study halls. They spoke in hushed tones, careful not to draw attention, but their discussions were serious. They were not angry in the traditional sense, they were methodical. Plans were drafted. Communication lines were tested. Every human community began a subtle, invisible preparation. Humans do not always announce their strength. They do not always wave flags or make threats. Their power grows quietly, measured, and precise. Alien species began to notice the change. Traders reported fewer humans in markets, fewer ships in busy routes, and less chatter over communication networks. On some stations, human diplomats quietly withdrew from public appearances, smiling politely but speaking less. Council observers wrote reports describing humans as unpredictable, unfocused, and inconsequential. because they misunderstood the quiet intensity of human planning. One human diplomat, Mara Solis, visited an alien merchant guild. She spoke calmly and clearly, and her words seemed polite, even friendly. Yet the aliens left her presence uneasy. She had asked questions about trade routes, resources, and fleet movements, not for profit, but to understand the networks that connected the council. Humans were mapping the galaxy in ways no one could detect, quietly learning every weakness and every opportunity. Meanwhile, the council continued its meetings, unaware of the storm growing among humans. Council members believed that the humans had been punished, that one small child's death would serve as a lesson. They assumed that humans would obey, as they always had. They did not notice that humans do not obey injustice. They do not forget. They do not forgive easily. In the military sectors of human space, officers reactivated old defense systems. Ships that had sat idle for decades were polished, repaired, and tested. Young pilots trained in simulations that mirrored council attacks, learning how to defend civilians without escalation. Engineers upgraded communications, navigation, and logistics systems, ensuring humans could act across multiple star systems with speed and precision. It was not a war preparation, not yet. It was readiness, a calm, steady, unstoppable readiness. The Council attempted to maintain normal operations, but their power began to waver. Small failures began to occur across the galaxy: minor communications glitches, unexplained delays in enforcement patrols, subtle disruptions in trade networks. They were not attacks. They were tests. Humans were showing the galaxy that even without aggression, they could influence systems at every level. Other species began to talk among themselves. "Why are humans so quiet?" one alien asked. "They do nothing, yet everything seems to change." Rumors spread. Some species feared the humans. Some admired them. Some tried to warn the Council. But the Council, confident in its authority, dismissed the warnings. It assumed the humans were still small, weak, and manageable. They were very wrong. Within human colonies, children were taught the story of Leela, not as a tale of tragedy, but as a lesson in courage, empathy, and patience. They learned that humans could survive cruelty, endure injustice, and act decisively when necessary. They learned the oldest rule of human society: protect the young, the innocent, and those who cannot defend themselves. That rule would guide every decision, every action, and every thought. The humans did not shout or demand justice. They did not attack. They did not show their hands. But across the stars, subtle patterns began to emerge. Supply chains shifted without explanation. Vital resources moved under human control. Small, quiet interventions in council systems slowed their operations and caused confusion. Not one human life was lost. Not one council ship was destroyed. Humans were showing restraint, but every observer could feel the potential for greater force. Alien ambassadors began to whisper. "The humans, they are patient, but their patience is dangerous." Traders reported that human logistics fleets seemed to appear wherever they were needed, restoring systems the Council ignored. Scientists discovered that humans could fix problems faster, more efficiently, and more cleverly than any other species had imagined. In the quiet, humans were proving their strength. At the same time, human leaders communicated across the galaxy using encrypted networks. Messages went out not with anger, but with clarity. "Remember the child," one message said simply. "We will act to protect life. We will act to protect the innocent. And when the time comes, the Council will answer for its choices." And preparation, when done with patience and intelligence, can be more powerful than any open attack. In the human research stations, engineers experimented with new technologies. Navigation systems were improved so humans could respond faster than any fleet in the galaxy. Communications were upgraded to allow instantaneous alerts across light years. Logistics networks were mapped so humans could supply colonies under any circumstance. Every system was designed not for war, but for protection, coordination, and resilience. The Council finally noticed anomalies: minor glitches in their monitoring arrays, trade delays, and strange patterns in fleet movements. They sent investigators, but humans were careful. No attack occurred. No sabotage was direct. Humans were careful, precise, and calculated. It was almost invisible, yet it was powerful. Meanwhile, human citizens continued with daily life. Children went to school, markets opened, families ate together. Humans smiled politely at aliens. They played games, told stories, and studied the stars. But beneath this ordinary life, a silent strength was growing. Every human action, no matter how small, contributed to a greater purpose. For some aliens, this calm human preparation was frightening. For others, it was fascinating. But none could predict what humans would do when finally pushed beyond patience. Across the galaxy, a lesson was forming. Humans endure, humans adapt, and humans never forget injustice. Leela's parents, despite their grief, led by example. They spoke quietly in every council hall and every colony meeting. "Remember her," they said softly. "Remember her life, protect others as she would have been protected. Do not act rashly, but act wisely, act decisively." Their words carried weight because humans listened to one another. Communities organized, systems improved. Connections strengthened. The story of one small child became the foundation for a species-wide plan. In secret, humans even began training in methods of strategic influence. Not weapons, not armies, but techniques of coordination, efficiency, and resilience. They learned to respond to emergencies faster than anyone else could. They learned to organize civilians to maintain order during crises. They learned the subtle art of control without aggression, of influence without direct confrontation. By the time a full year had passed since Leela's death, the galaxy had changed without realizing it. Humans appeared smaller, weaker, and more polite than ever. They smiled, obeyed minor rules, and continued daily routines. But behind the scenes, they were connected, coordinated, and capable of responding to any threat. They were a species of quiet strength, patience, and intelligence, a species the Council did not yet understand. And all of it started with one child. Her memory was alive in every conversation, in every plan, in every calculation. The Council believed they had punished humans. They believed humans were fragile. They did not understand that humans were preparing, slowly, carefully, and without pride. They were preparing to show the galaxy the true meaning of strength, patience, focus, empathy, and resolve. Humans waited, they worked, they improved themselves, and they remembered Leela. The quiet fire of their determination began to spread. Across planets, colonies, and star systems, humans shared knowledge, reinforced networks, and ensured that every colony could survive any emergency. The galaxy still slept, unaware of the invisible strength gathering within one species that had once been underestimated. And when the time came, though no one yet knew when, it would not be an angry scream, a chaotic revolt, or a sudden war. It would be precise, measured, and overwhelming in its effectiveness. The galaxy would soon learn that humans could act decisively, and that no injustice, no matter how small, would go unanswered. Until that day arrived, humans continued their quiet, careful work, and the rest of the galaxy, even those closest to them, continued to underestimate them. Humans had waited. They had observed. They had planned. Now, without declaring war, they began to act. The first signs were subtle, almost invisible. Communications between Council worlds became slower. Data transmissions experienced tiny interruptions. Fleet patrols arrived late or in the wrong locations. It was never direct sabotage, never an open attack. Humans were not destroying anything. They were influencing systems with precision, testing limits, and showing the galaxy that they could act quietly and efficiently. On a distant human station, Captain Ryan Holt watched multiple screens. Each screen displayed a different sector, a different trade route, a different communication network. He had been trained for this moment, though no one had known it was coming. Every minor glitch, every unexpected delay, every subtle rerouting of Council data passed through human hands carefully and silently. Humans were not breaking the law, they were bending the systems to reveal their weaknesses. "Check Sector 7-9, Holt said to his team. "The enforcement patrol is late again." "What's causing the delay?" "Every mistake they make is information." They had never faced patience, intelligence, and focus applied at a scale they could not control. Meanwhile, humans in other colonies worked quietly to map every trade route, every fleet path, every Council-controlled communication channel. Ships moved without drawing attention. Teams of engineers optimized networks. Algorithms that humans had developed decades ago now ran quietly in Council space, learning patterns, identifying weak points, and ensuring that humans could act when the time came. The Council began to notice small problems. A patrol fleet sent to a remote sector found that all supply routes were misaligned. A data transmission meant to secure sensitive records arrived late, causing confusion and minor errors. At first, the Council dismissed these incidents as coincidence or technical failure, but the errors grew in frequency and precision. Something, or someone, was influencing their operations without being detected. In a quiet observation room on a distant human outpost, Dr. Liana Crest smiled. She had developed software that could subtly adjust traffic flows, reroute shipments, and even create the illusion of delays. It was all harmless, yet disruptive. "It's working," she said softly. "They think it's random, they don't see us, but we're learning everything about them." They wanted knowledge, influence, and preparation. The death of Leela had taught them that humans could not trust systems that valued law over life. Now they would demonstrate that they could act effectively, precisely, and without violence if necessary. Across human colonies, children continued to learn the story of Leela, not with sorrow but with inspiration. They learned that humans endure. They adapt, they influence situations without aggression. They find clever ways to protect themselves and others. It was the essence of human strength, and it was now being applied at a galactic level. Council members, confident in their authority, were unprepared. They did not expect patience as a weapon. They did not expect subtlety as strength. They assumed humans would either beg for forgiveness or rage in anger. Neither happened. Humans did not protest. Humans did not scream. Humans worked quietly and efficiently in ways that could not be traced to any individual person. At the same time, humans were helping other species. Civilians and traders began to notice the humans' quiet interventions. Disrupted supply routes were repaired. Stranded transports were guided safely to their destinations. Communication failures were fixed faster than the Council could respond. Humans were demonstrating competence, reliability, and empathy, qualities the Council had long ignored. In one council chamber, members whispered among themselves, "Humans, they are doing nothing, yet they control everything." Hell. Small drones could monitor fleet movements across vast distances. Communication hubs could reroute vital data instantly. Sensors tracked anomalies in Council operations. It was preparation disguised as normal work. The Council believed humans were busy with research, trade, and family life. In reality, every system, every calculation, and every network contributed to a larger plan. Even human diplomats continued to play their roles. They smiled at alien leaders, attended meetings, and followed protocol. They laughed politely at jokes, asked courteous questions, and behaved in ways that seemed ordinary. But beneath the surface, they were analyzing every word, every gesture, every pattern. Every council decision, every moment of hesitation was noted and remembered. Mara Solis, now a senior human diplomat, observed a council vote from a distance. Her eyes scanned the chamber as alien members debated laws and policies. "They still think they are untouchable," she murmured. "They still believe they control the galaxy. When the time comes, they will." Her death had sparked a quiet, disciplined campaign that spread across human space, linking minds, skills, and determination into one unstoppable current. Council fleets continued to patrol, unaware that their movements were being tracked, mapped, and analyzed. Every patrol, every detour, every delay was data. Humans were learning their weaknesses without risk. Every error the Council made revealed another opportunity. Humans did not need warships or weapons to gain power. They used intelligence, coordination, and patience. For months, nothing violent occurred. Humans acted invisibly, subtly, like a shadow across the galaxy. Yet every council member who observed anomalies felt unease. Something was changing, something they could not control. Even the traders and merchants who had worked with humans began to notice patterns. Ships arrived on time when they were supposed to fail. Data arrived intact when council systems predicted errors. Humans were everywhere without being seen. Their influence was subtle, precise, and impossible to trace. In quiet moments, human leaders spoke to each other across encrypted channels. "We are ready," one message said. "We do not need to act with force yet, but the galaxy will see that we are prepared. Patience has value, intelligence has power, and memory, our memory, is a weapon stronger than any fleet." Their fleets grew cautious, unsure of where to go or what to trust. Even small delays caused ripple effects across their bureaucratic systems. Humans had not touched a single ship, had not fired a weapon, and had not committed a crime, yet the Council was losing control. Back on human colonies, children continued to learn stories of Leela. They learned that humans act with purpose, that patience is a form of strength, and that cleverness and care can be more powerful than aggression. They were taught that intelligence, empathy, and coordination were true measures of power. The death of one child had awakened a whole species, and that awakening was now spreading across the stars. By the end of the year, it was clear. Humans had changed the balance of power in the galaxy. The Council, confident in its authority, had overlooked the quiet determination of a species they believed weak. Humans had acted subtly but decisively. They had gained influence without violence, respect without threat, and power without fear. All because they remembered one small child who had been taken too soon, and humans were not finished. They had shown the galaxy what they could do quietly. They had proved their intelligence, patience, and determination. The next step, when it came, would not be quiet. When humans finally acted openly, the galaxy would learn that a species underestimated is a species dangerous. For now, humans waited. They continued to act subtly, carefully, efficiently. They continued to grow in influence without anyone noticing. Every minor adjustment, every silent correction, every act of guidance was a piece of the larger plan. Leela's memory guided them, inspired them, and reminded them that humans protect the innocent at any cost. The Council still believed humans were harmless, still believed humans were patient but weak, still believed they controlled the situation. They were wrong. Humans had already begun shaping the galaxy in ways the Council could not see, and the true power of humanity was only beginning to be revealed. Humans did not shout. Humans did not rage. Humans did not demand justice. Humans acted with patience, intelligence, and precision. They remembered Leela, and they prepared. The galaxy, for the first time, was starting to notice. Humans had waited long enough. Months of careful observation, subtle influence, and quiet preparation had finally brought them to a point where action, though still precise and controlled, could no longer be invisible. Across the galaxy, systems were now ready for human intervention, and the balance of power, so long dominated by the Galactic Council, began to shift. It began with the smallest actions. Human engineers quietly rerouted supply lines that the Council had assumed untouchable. Civilians stranded on distant trade stations suddenly found assistance from human crews who seemed to appear out of nowhere. The Council fleet sent to monitor supply chains found that their ships were being guided, directed, and sometimes delayed, not by weapons, but by intelligence. Humans were everywhere, yet nowhere. Every movement was calculated, every action coordinated, every intervention precise. Captain Ryan Holt oversaw one such operation from a command center orbiting a neutral star. He watched the holographic map of a Council-controlled trade sector. Fleets were delayed at minor intersections, shipments were rerouted for safety, and communication signals were subtly corrected. To an outsider, it seemed random. To Holt, it was art. "Focus on Fleet Delta 9, Holt instructed. "The Council thinks their patrols are safe. Let's see how they respond when routes suddenly change. Keep civilians protected at all costs. Remember, patience is our weapon." "They appear to do nothing," one said, "and yet every system they touch improves." Scientists studying galactic traffic patterns saw trends they could not explain. "How are humans everywhere?" they asked. "They are too small, too weak, and yet they control outcomes we cannot predict." They issued commands to fleets, sent inspectors to critical sectors, and demanded explanations for the disruptions. Each Council fleet arrived on time, but the data they relied upon had been quietly adjusted. Ships went in circles. Signals bounced unexpectedly. Patrols followed routes that made no sense. And all the while, civilians were guided safely by humans. Not one life was lost. Not one weapon fired. On a human station near the edge of the Council sector, Dr. Liana Crest observed the data feeds. Her software adjusted flow patterns in real time, creating minor disruptions that the Council interpreted as technical failures. "Every movement is recorded," she said to her team. "Every response is predictable. Every mistake is useful." "They still don't see us, but they are learning to fear their own systems." "We act not for power," she said, "but to ensure that innocent lives are protected. Any species that values fairness and life must choose wisely." They shared intelligence, aided with logistics, and supported human interventions. The galaxy was beginning to realize that the Council was no longer untouchable. In the training halls of human colonies, young cadets were now learning tactics that were no longer theoretical. Simulations of fleet movement, resource protection, and communication interception were practiced daily. "Remember Leela," instructors reminded them. "She represents every life we protect. We act with precision, we act with intelligence, we act with care." The cadets understood the stakes. They were part of a species-wide operation, and every calculation mattered. Human influence grew quietly but undeniably. In one system, a Council patrol fleet attempted to intercept a shipment. They arrived late, delayed by minor anomalies that humans had created. By the time they reached the shipment, it had already been rerouted safely by human crews. The Council called it incompetence. Humans called it success. Each error, each delay, each failure of the Council to maintain control was proof that humans could manage complexity with precision no other species had mastered. The Council grew frustrated. Meetings were held in emergency sessions. High-ranking members demanded explanations. "Humans are interfering," one shouted, but evidence was impossible to find. "Our systems fail without cause. Our fleets cannot predict outcomes. Something is changing and we do not know why." Humans had changed the rules without breaking them. They influenced outcomes without weapons. They protected lives without aggression. And all the while, they remained patient. They acted as a single organism, connected by memory, intelligence, and resolve. On a small human colony near the Council border, families gathered quietly in their homes. They shared updates, learned from each other, and participated in the silent campaign. Farmers monitored trade signals, engineers tested logistics, and teachers instructed children on the importance of observation, intelligence, and patience. Leela's memory was alive in every conversation. Her death was no longer a tragedy. It was the spark that united a species and set it on a course for the galaxy's attention. Even within the Council, cracks appeared. Some members began questioning the validity of their authority. "How can one species have such influence without aggression?" one whispered in a private chamber. "It is unlike anything we have seen before." "Are we failing?" Others dismissed it, believing humans would tire, that their patience would break. They were wrong. Humans never tired of purpose. They never wavered in resolve. They did not act out of anger, but out of principle. In human command centers, analysts watched as minor interventions grew into major influence. Trade routes stabilized under human guidance, fleet movements became predictable under human observation, and supply chains operated more efficiently than ever before. The Council could no longer ignore the humans. They were everywhere but nowhere. They acted without weapons, without force, without threat. Yet the balance of power had already shifted. Captain Holt watched the latest operation unfold. Council enforcement ships attempted to block a humanitarian convoy. Humans had rerouted the convoy hours before, and sensors ensured that all civilians reached safety. "Every fleet that fails teaches us," he said. "Every delay, every mistake, every misstep is information. Every failure of theirs is our advantage." In a remote colony, engineers tested a new network that allowed instantaneous communication across light years. Supplies could be rerouted in real time, fleets coordinated without delay, and civilians guided to safety without anyone knowing. "This is the future," Dr. Crest said, smiling. "The Council thinks they control the galaxy, but we guide it without their knowledge. We act with intelligence, not violence. We seek justice and stability." Her words spread quietly across species networks, encouraging cooperation without force. Humans had become a silent power in the galaxy. They influenced, they protected, and they prepared. The Council, confident and arrogant, had no idea that a single species could act so decisively without aggression. Other species began to follow humans' example, quietly coordinating and sharing knowledge, inspired by their patience, intelligence, and moral strength. As months passed, the interventions became larger yet remained precise. Trade disruptions were minimized. Patrol routes were subtly rerouted to prevent conflict. Communication systems were adjusted to prioritize safety. Humans were everywhere, but no one could trace their actions. Every act was deliberate, every calculation exact, and every success a step toward accountability for the Council. By the end of the year, the galaxy had changed. The Council no longer had complete control. Minor failures in their systems became frequent, creating confusion, frustration, and fear. Other species had begun to recognize the humans' competence and reliability. Humans had not fought a single battle, yet they were respected, feared, and admired. Every human, from the youngest child to the oldest elder, knew their place in this quiet revolution. They acted not for revenge, not for glory, but for principle. They remembered Leela. They remembered her life, her innocence, and the injustice that had been done. Her memory had united a species, guiding them to act with intelligence, patience, and precision. And the Galactic Council, arrogant and blind, did not yet understand that their power was slipping through their fingers. Humans had begun to reshape the galaxy without weapons, without war, and without chaos. And when the time came, they would act openly. They would act decisively. And the galaxy would see that the species it had underestimated was not weak, not fragile, and not obedient. Humans were strong, clever, patient, and united, and they would protect the innocent at any cost. The quiet intervention of humanity was now complete. The stage was set. Other species were watching. The council was faltering, and humans, patient and prepared, remembered Leela. They remembered her life. They remembered her death. And they waited for the day when the galaxy would finally see what humans could do when they were forced to act openly. The galaxy had changed. The Galactic Council no longer moved with confidence. Their fleets were delayed, their communications disrupted, and their authority questioned by species across the stars. All of it had happened without humans firing a single weapon, without a single act of aggression. Humans had acted with intelligence, patience, and moral purpose. Now it was time for the next step, a step that would make the galaxy finally see the strength, courage, and unity of humanity. Captain Ryan Holt watched from the command center orbiting a neutral planet. Every fleet, every convoy, every communication line had been carefully monitored. Systems were aligned. Civilian evacuations were prepared. Allies from other species were ready. The stage was set. Humanity would act not for conquest, not for revenge, but for justice and protection. "Status report," Holt said to his team. "All systems operational," the junior officer replied. "All allied species are in position. Civilian safety is secured. Council fleets are moving as predicted. Our goal is accountability." Now the Council would experience it firsthand. Human ships moved silently, their fleets coordinated across light years. They did not attack. They did not destroy. They positioned themselves to protect civilians, to intercept illegal actions, and to restore systems the Council had neglected. Every movement was deliberate. Every intervention ensured the safety of life while demonstrating the incompetence and moral failure of the Council. In a distant system, a Council fleet attempted to enforce a trade blockade. Humans had already rerouted supplies, guided civilian transports, and coordinated with neutral species. When the fleet arrived, they found the blockade ineffective. Civilian ships were safe. Supply routes were operational. Council officers were confused, frustrated, and unprepared. "This isn't possible," one officer said. "They appear to be everywhere, yet we see nothing." Traders, scientists, and diplomats offered assistance, sharing intelligence and resources. The Council had relied on fear, isolation, and authority. Humans relied on connection, cooperation, and empathy. It was a difference the Council could not overcome. Mara Solis addressed a gathering of species in a neutral sector. "We do not seek to destroy the Council," she said. "We seek to ensure the protection of life, fairness in law, and accountability for those in power. Their rules placed law above life. That must end. The galaxy deserves better." Species began to realize that the humans were not acting out of anger, but out of principle. Humans were demonstrating that patience, intelligence, and moral courage could shape events more effectively than fear or violence ever had. In the command center, Captain Holt watched the final Council fleet approach. It was the largest group remaining loyal to the old order. Humans had prepared, predicting every possible move. Civilian evacuation routes were complete. Communications were secure, and humans were ready to act decisively, but without unnecessary violence. "Engage the intervention protocols," Holt said. "Guide the fleet, ensure safety, maintain accountability." Systems previously controlled by the Council were quietly rerouted. Patrol ships were intercepted without aggression and guided to safe zones. Supply chains that the Council had attempted to disrupt now functioned flawlessly. Every move the Council made only revealed their weaknesses and the humans' mastery of coordination. On a neutral station, Dr. Liana Crest monitored the activity. Her software ensured every civilian was protected, every shipment delivered, and every fleet movement tracked. "They will see what humans can do," she said quietly. "Not because we destroyed them, but because we protected life and showed competence." Civilians moved freely, safe under human coordination. For the first time in history, the Council faced a species whose strength was not measured in weapons, but in intelligence, unity, and moral purpose. Their power was slipping. Their authority crumbled. Other species openly questioned their decisions. Humans had created a galaxy where justice, protection, and cooperation mattered more than fear and obedience. In the Council's chambers, members argued and shouted, but their voices fell flat. Systems failed. Communications were intercepted. Enforcement fleets were neutralized, not destroyed, but controlled. Council members realized too late that humans had anticipated every move. Every failure was evidence of their moral and strategic inferiority. Human leaders addressed the galaxy directly. "We do not seek vengeance," Mara Solis said, her voice clear across billions of kilometers. "We do not seek power over other species. We act to ensure that no innocent life is ever lost because of law, protocol, or fear." The death of one child reminded us that systems without compassion are flawed. The galaxy deserves better. The Council must change. They had protected civilians, guided allies, and neutralized the Council's ability to harm others without ever firing a single weapon. In one final act of accountability, the Council was forced to acknowledge their failures. Members were removed from power, their fleets reassigned, and their laws reformed to prioritize the protection of life above all else. Humans did not take control. They offered guidance, training, and cooperation. They ensured that no species, regardless of size or strength, would be powerless again. Captain Holt watched the final transmissions from the Council fleet. Their officers sent messages of apology, confusion, and respect. They had underestimated humanity, and they had learned a lesson that would never be forgotten. Humans had acted with restraint, precision, and intelligence. They had protected life, ensured fairness, and enforced accountability without violence. Mara Solis addressed the galaxy once more. "We acted not because we sought war, but because we cannot allow injustice to continue." The death of one human child reminded us that even the smallest life has infinite value. Let that lesson guide all species. Let fairness, protection, and compassion govern our actions. Children learn the lesson that kindness is strength, that planning is power, and that protecting the innocent is the highest duty of any species. On human colonies, families celebrated quietly. They honored the memory of Leela, the child whose death had sparked the awakening of a species. They remembered that one life, valued and protected, could change the course of the galaxy. Captain Holt and Mara Solis stood together on a station overlooking a cluster of stars. "We have done it," Solis said softly. Holt nodded. "We have shown the galaxy who humans are, not weak, not fragile, but patient, intelligent, united, and brave. We protect what matters, we remember. And we act when necessary." The final message spread across every system, every colony, every fleet. Do not mistake human kindness for weakness. We value life, we protect the innocent, and we act decisively when necessary. Humanity remembers, humanity acts, and the galaxy is safer because of it. The galaxy had witnessed the power of humanity, not in war, but in unity, intelligence, and moral courage. Humans had protected the innocent, guided allies, and reshaped systems, proving that their strength lay not in weapons, but in principle, patience, and determination. And so the galaxy entered a new era, one shaped not by fear, but by the quiet, unstoppable force of a species that remembered, that cared, and that acted when the time was right.